there, my name is Megan and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing my 2024 reading wrap-up and statistics video. I got this idea because I got my year in review email from Goodreads that reviews all of the books that I read in 2024, so I thought it would be fun to do a video on it. And then I'm also going to discuss a breakdown of the different genres I read, the series that I finished, the series that I'm going to continue or DNF, as well as some new series that I started and want to continue. But before we go ahead and get on into the statistics, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button, as well as giving this video a like to throw my channel a little bit of support. Alrighty, here is my 2024 reading year in review according to Goodreads. So let's take a look. I read 43 books. My goal was 40, so I'm happy with that. I read 17,704 pages. I don't really know what to think about that. I guess that's good. All right, some statistics. My shortest book was The Island of Dr. Moreau, 160 pages. The version I have actually is like 130 pages. And the longest book I read was Ruin by John Gwynne, 768 pages. Yep, sounds right. Took me a while to get through that one. My average book length was 411 pages. I feel like that's pretty good. That's a pretty standard page count of a book, I feel like. My most shelved book I read was The Giver. I've read that multiple times with over 3 million shelves. And then the least shelved is Thirsty Ground by Kimber St. Lawrence. It's probably because it's a new release coming out in May, and I don't imagine a lot of people have heard about it yet. My average rating was 3.4. That's good. In the past, it's been closer to 3 or at 3, so that means that I enjoyed most of the books I read. I don't even think I gave a book 1 star this year. I might have. I don't remember. All right, my first review of the year was the Book of M. Didn't like it, by Pung Shepherd. And here is just an overview of all of the books that I read this year. 2024 went by so fast. And I know the ones that are big like this are like 5 stars. I gave them 5 stars. All right, that was a pretty good year, end of year review. And my last review of the year, Pandemic by Robin Cook. All right, I will have a review up for The Island of Dr. Moreau. It just I haven't posted it on Goodreads yet. All right, friends, so let's talk about the series that I finished in 2024, because I have a tendency to start a lot of series and then struggle to finish them, as we all know if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time. So I actually have finished a couple of series. So the first one is actually a series that I started this year, and that is the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Cixin Liu. I've already talked about this, so I'm not going to discuss it in any more depth. It's an adult sci-fi series. I started it and finished it in 2024. And then I finally finished the Founders trilogy. This is by Robert Jackson Bennett. I had actually read books 1 and 2, this in Shorefall, a couple of years ago, and I never read Locklands, the 3rd book, when it came out. This book, or this series, it's very action-packed. There are a lot of nuances you have to pay attention to. The magic system is very complicated, so if you miss anything, you're going to be lost, in my opinion, with the plot. So I decided just to reread the first 2 books and then finish with Locklands. So I finally finished the Founders trilogy. And then I finally finished the Ravensmark trilogy by Ed McDonald. I read Ravencry and Crowfall this year, and really underrated, gritty, grimdark series. I loved it. And then I have 2 YA duologies that I started and then read both books this year. The first one is Contagion by Erin Bowman. The second book is Immunity. I think I read these back to back. And then we have the Anatomy duology, which is a YA. It's got fantastical elements, but it's more like a historical fiction. And I read both books in this series. I finished the Transformation trilogy by Cassie Alexander by reading Make Her. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling and has some smut in it. Then I had 3 series that I continued but I didn't finish. We have The Faithful and the Fallen Quartet by John Gwynne. I read Ruin, so I just have 1 more book to read before I'm done with that series. And then I'm including the Mickey 7 series on here. I read Antimatter Blues. And while the main plot of these two books was wrapped up in Antimatter Blues, it was left open, the ending was left open as if there could be more books in this series, kind of like we're following Mickey's adventures as he travels across the universe. So I don't actually know if there's going to be another book in the series, but there is a setup for one. By the way, the movie for this comes out in 2025, and I watched the trailer. Looks interesting. And then I continued the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson by reading Kytonic. Then I have a couple of series that I started and I may or may not continue with them. So I'm going to start with the series that I do want to continue. The first one is The Last Legacy by James Logan, the first book being The Silver Blood Promise. I'm really disappointed because I think the second book doesn't come out till August. I was hoping it came out earlier, but it doesn't, so I'm a bit bummed about that. Then we have The Age of Wrath by Anthony Ryan. Definitely going to continue this series. I would probably read anything this man puts out at this point. Thirdly is Thirsty Ground by Kimber St. Lawrence. I haven't read a YA book in a while that I really enjoyed like I did this book, and I actually do want to read the sequel. I'm getting very picky with my YA books because there's just so many of them to read, and I really want to be gripped and experience something new, and this one did it. And then I have the Crowns of Nyaxia series, which I already have the second two books, and I need to get on it and continue reading because I really enjoyed this. Then I have just two books that were the first books in a series that I don't plan on continuing. The first one is Compass and Blade by Rachel Greenlaw. This was on my most disappointing reads list of 2024. It was just too tropey and I hated the romance, so I'm not going to continue. And then the next one is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This one I was disappointed in. I was expecting just the writing to be better, the story to be better, the romance to be more engaging for me personally. I really liked the world. I love this cover. Like, honestly, this was a cover buy. Well, the story sounded good too. But the second book, I think, is a companion, and it's called Wicked Games, or the series is called Wicked Games, and I think it follows her sister. So it's technically a companion novel. The story, the main plot, the main conflict in this book was wrapped up, so it can definitely be read as a standalone. But if you like her work, you like her world, you might want to continue with the other books in the series. I didn't like it enough to want to continue. The last thing I'm going to be including in my year-end review is the genres that I read this year broken down. So like I said, I read 43 books, so I like breaking them down by genre so you guys can get a feel for what types of books I read the most of. So the first one, and I'm referencing my notes here, the first one is YA Sci-Fi. I read 5 YA Sci-Fi, which is good because it's been a minute since I've read a lot of YA Sci-Fi. YA Fantasy, I read 3, so not as much there. And then Romantasy, which is a genre that is just blowing up all over the place, and I just started reading last year. I read 5 Romantasy. As for adult sci-fi, I read 7, which I'm happy with because I've been wanting to read more adult sci-fi. Adult fantasy, I read 9. Makes sense. I do love a good fantasy. I read more thrillers this year than I normally do. I read 6 thrillers and finished reading Riley Sager's all of the books that he has published. He has one coming out in 2025 that I'm super excited for. Romance. I never in my life have read 4 romance books in a year. Darn Penelope Douglas. I just am not a contemporary romance reader, but she writes more dark romance. She does not write light and fluffy romance. Her romances are tough. I read 3 classics. I am happy about that. And I did include The Giver in the classics. It wasn't on my classics TBR. Sorry guys if my angle looks different. My camera cut out in the middle of filming, so that was fun. All right, I was talking about classics. So I've read 3 classics, and I did include The Giver on that because I consider The Giver a modern classic. I read 2 classics off of my classic TBR, and that is Persuasion by Jane Austen and The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. So would like to read more this year though. And then lastly, I read 1 nonfiction. So another goal of mine is to read more nonfiction. I tend to start nonfiction and don't finish them, so that's not a good habit to get into. All right, you guys, so I just wanted to share with you my 2024 reading year in review and give you some statistics about what I read, what series I started, finished, going to continue, DNF'd, the different genres I read, all of that. Let me know in the comments some of your 2024 reading statistics, or let me know if you've read any of these books or series and what you thought of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in another video soon. Goodbye!